for being here. My name is Alan Corbett, this is Mykalin Jones, and we're going to be talking about our substring search tool for the Irish language. We're going to be talking about ourselves, the premise behind the app, building the app, any kind of problem solutions or challenges that we had during the work, and the possibility of future work as well. It's a lot to pack into the talk, so if we have time we'll also take questions. However, if it isn't enough time, we'll be outside for the next hour or so as well, so please feel free to come and talk to us if you can, or if you have any questions. Mykalin?
So, hi, I'm Mykalin Jones. My background is in physics, but I'm a data scientist and founder of Astro Tutors. I work on creating pedagogical materials and teaching people data science. And I'm also a passionate learner of the Irish language. I'm very passionate about languages in general. And if you have any questions about the code later on, you can check out my GitHub, megajules8, or just come and talk to me.
Yeah, and I'm the non-IT person today. My name is Alan Corbett. I have a background in translation. I have a BA in Lannan Astrachain, that's for the English Speakers Translation Studies. I also have an MA in translation, and I'm now doing my PhD in translation. Outside of that, I was a Fulbright foreign language teaching assistant in Montana. And as of this Wednesday coming, I will be an award-winning literary translator, but nobody knows that yet, so it's a secret. Thanks very much. And in my career, I would say, as a PhD researcher, I've published on translation and architecture, pedagogical translation in the Northern Irish education system, Irish, German, Irish translation, and I have a forthcoming paper about self-translation in Irish as well. So the whole thing behind our project basically started with a problem that I had in my work as a translator. I wanted to translate this into Irish, Taighdeoir. If there's any Italians, I apologise. It translates into English as translator-trader and kind of speaks of this idea that translators are traders of the language that they translate out of. I wanted to translate this into Irish, but I had a problem. I knew one word, translator, but I didn't have an equivalent for trader. So I knew that translator in Irish is Taighdeoir, and I kind of wanted to keep this TT, or this alliteration, and the kind of ending of the word as well. So I knew I needed a word that began with an A and ended in this OR sound, and the problem was I couldn't do this electronically. I used a lot of online resources, and there was no way of doing this, so I had to resort to the big dictionary of Irish, which is about this thick, and read the entire dictionary to find something or a suitable word. Thankfully, I didn't have to go too far in the dictionary, and I came across this word avashor, which means adversary or the devil. So not entirely traitor, but we still have these traitorous elements. So although it's not a direct word-for-word translation, I still get to keep this a, or sound, Taighdeoir, avashor. So this was the problem. And then another thing that kind of sprang to mind was when I was doing this work and looking through this dictionary, when I was at university for my bachelor's degree, we had this program called Winglecht on all the computers, and it's an electronic version of the Irish dictionary from 1977. And it had the ability to search for prefixes and suffixes. But the problem is, it's now only available on a CD-ROM, which is only compatible with Windows 98, Windows XP, and Windows Vista. It's still available at a price of €20. From one retailer online who is in Cork. So I eventually bought it as with part of this research, but it's not great. So I asked Mykalin if she could help me with this, or rather, I was given off and Mykalin said she could help. So why focus on just these kind of endings and beginnings, these suffixes and prefixes, or substrings, as we also call them in this presentation? They're very important in Irish, and I'll be talking about that in the next slide. But in our work together, Mykalin and I, we really want to see computer programming as a complement to language professionals. And at the base of everything, we want to make things that allow translators to be as creative as possible, and then make the computers do all the boring stuff. So Irish morphemes, or substrings, as I said, are really important in Irish. They are prefixes, suffixes, and affixes, and they're all present in the Irish language. They can denote number, either whether a word is singular or plural, grammatical gender, masculine or feminine, noun declension, which is just a fancy word for how a noun is conjugated, and basically how it deals with other cases, and then how it is pluralised. So for example, Calleen, which is the word for a girl in Irish, is ironically masculine and is fourth declension. So we know, masculine fourth declension is going to be Calleeni with an I-fat at the end for the plural. Bilan is the word for restaurant, it's feminine and the second declension. So we're like, that's going to be Bilana for restaurants. Prefixes and suffixes and affixes in Irish, they can be dependent or independent as well. So that means that they can have meaning apart from the word that they're attached to, if they're independent, or they can only really exist as a compound word. So for example, Rói, Allskull, For Agran, or For Agan, they are all dependent affixes, or rather prefixes. So Rói is too good. Allskull, high school, which is our word for university. For Agan is like really strong violence. And then independent ones are words that kind of exist on their own. You can find them in the dictionary. Deoir, black ice, with do meaning black. Cruachest is a difficult question, with cru meaning like hard or difficult. And then Cion Ars, the head office, with Cion also meaning your head. So creating this application, my aims were creating a program or an application which allows users to search for letter combinations, substrings or morphemes, with a user-friendly AI for us who don't really deal with coding, and for the application to be bilingual English-Irish to kind of complement or reflect current websites and applications that we already have with the Irish language. So we decided to invent Míreadóir. So this is Míreadóir. If you want to get your phones out, the QR code will take you to the website. I made the logo as well, thanks very much. If anybody needs any creative design done, please contact me. And we decided on the name Míreadóir for a couple of reasons. Mír in Irish is a bit, portion, piece, part or morsel. It's a very, very small bit, but it also refers to a particle in terms of grammar. So we really wanted to use this mir. This ador at the end just means so it's the particle . And also we found that there's this word in Spanish, Mirador, which means a viewpoint, a vantage point. So we thought with our new application, it would be a new view of the Irish language. We did have some problems with kind of describing what this thing that we created does, with a lot of different terminology involved. Substrings is kind of the overarching term that we use. It's the most correct technical terminology. However, it's used more with computational linguistics and computer science. And I was afraid that Irish speakers maybe wouldn't be able to understand it because it's not a term that we normally use. Morpheme is more known to Irish language speakers and our assumed users. However, it's not as encompassing. So all morphemes are substrings, but not all substrings are morphemes. So this was the problem.
Except for free morphemes, which are just strings.
Except for free morphemes are just strings. And then we also have affixes, which is probably the least encompassing terminology that we use, because Míreadóir does more than just these affixes. So affixes are just prefixes, suffixes, any kind of combination of letters. So for now, we're just calling it a substring and morpheme search tool. However, we'd love your input if you have any suggestions how to resolve this problem and make it a lot more compact to describe. Our findings thus far, we created the app in June. And we've been able to share it with some of our colleagues and friends, and we find that it can answer a lot of grammar questions. So, for example, geminates in Irish. Does Irish have a double L? Does Irish have a double N? We've also had it used by researchers at DCU to help with deciphering words in speech on the TV. So they can go, oh, that word ends in ach. I'll type in ach and see what comes up, and then they get the right result. It can also be used as a learning tool. As I said before, prefixes and suffixes can be used to denote case and gender. So teachers and students can then use that for practice to find other examples of the same kind of word and then practice conjugating it into different cases. And it's also been used as a rhyming or an alliterating dictionary as well by some literary translators, which is really, really cool. So it's got 4 more uses than we initially thought. Here we go.
So yeah, when Ellen approached me and she just said, I'm having trouble looking up words by their ending, I said, girl, give me an afternoon and some regex, no problem. But then I realized pretty quickly she needs something that's very user-friendly for her and that she can share around with her friends. So I decided very simply just to use Streamlit. So one thing, if none of this has anything to do with you and you're sitting here being like, I don't know why I'm here, a lot of people have been really happy to find out, yes, Streamlit got rid of their paid tier, so you can't have your own custom domain anymore, and then Heroku got rid of their free tier, so a really good alternative you might want to consider is Render. At least for right now, it's working. You can deploy your Streamlit applications with them for free and set up a custom domain and everything like that. All right, so pride cometh before the fall, of course. So we wanted to really be able to search by morpheme, not just substring. So morphemes being these sort of atoms of information, the smallest bits of words that contain meaning, right? In order to be able to do that, you would need a dictionary of morphemes, but this is a minority language and it's under-resourced, and we don't have that. So I wanted to look and see, do any of the common natural language processing libraries that we tend to use, like NLTK or Spacey, could they help me out? And one thing is, generally they don't concern themselves with morpheme segmentation, which was my problem here. But there is morphological analysis, that you're probably familiar with. So stemming, it removes affixes other than the stem of the word. Lemmatization, it returns words to their lemma, so their dictionary form. And then parts of speech tagging tends to include some information that comes from morphological analysis, so gender, number, case tense, just like Ellen was saying. And the thing is, any morphological analysis is challenging for these morphologically rich languages. So why, right? The Irish language has initial mutation, so we'd say uru or eclipses. Different grammatical structures can stick a letter onto the beginning of a word, or it can lenite the word to shevu. So you get it's a softening of the word. It used to be denoted by a ponk on top of the first letter, now it's denoted by a h. And then, of course, you have, inflected prepositions. We don't say you have something, I have something. It's a gum, a gut, a give, so the word actually changes, and that actually means at you, at me. So a very different way of talking, of course. And then we have 5 noun and 4 verb declensions with their own set of rules as well. Thankfully, Irish is very regular, of course, so you could break this down in a rule-based way, but all of these are subject to change. There's going to be different inflected forms based off of your dialect, which there's 3 major dialects, of course. So, you can use rule-based methods in order to solve morpheme problems, or you can also use, of course, statistical or machine learning-based methods as well, and we'll talk about the 2 sort of different methods and their strengths and weaknesses and what people have done so far. But through this process, I realized, there's no Irish language pipelines, with NLTK or Spacey right now. So I had a really fantastic conversation at PyCon France with Ines, and she's been helping me out explore this a bit more. Spacey does currently support Irish, and it does feature a new Irish lemmatizer, so I'm excited to get started with that a bit more. So rule-based, what I mean by that, finite state transducers. So here you can see Irish natural language processing tools, starting, probably the oldest papers you're going to find, and it's still relevant information, is going to be on finite state transducers and solving the morpheme problem in Irish with finite state transducers. So if you saw my talk earlier with Vishal, we were talking about finite state machines. Finite state transducers, you can think, okay, I have this input and then I want to see, is it in this sort of this specific state? And, what we were talking about earlier, it says, yes, it is a match. Finite state transducers go a bit further and give you some sort of output based off of that. So what could a finite state transducer do? Well, think, you put in cats and it segments it for you. Okay, it's cats, it's cat plus s, and maybe it gives you some information like, okay, the root is cat and the suffix is s, and that makes it plural. All right, so then we could consider a machine-based method to do this. So I played around with something called Polyglot. There is Morphessor, which is for morpheme segmentation. It's a machine learning library in Python. And Polyglot is just a Morphessor model trained on 50,000 of the most common, supposedly Irish words. And I wanted to see how it would perform with derivational morphology and also with inflectional morphology. So derivational meaning these different morphemes combine together to change the meaning of the word, and inflectional morphology meaning these different parts combine to change the grammar of the word. So we can consider, for instance, a very common suffix in Irish, ach. So it means connected to or involving with or belonging to or having. So ro vrabach is excess profit. Ro, like Ellen said, means too much of something. Vrab isn't actually the root here, it should be brabus, and then ach is correct. So 2 of those are correct, and it did the segmentation in a sensical way at least. But then we look at this loan word, roba, that comes from, originally the French, some people would say it comes from the Normans, but other people would say it came in through English, doesn't matter, either way, it should just be roba. It is not too much ba. that makes no sense. Then we can consider another suffix that's very common, so acht. Yes, it is different from the first one. It's like ness or hood or idity or ship, so we have like senatorship here. That would be another loan word, senator. So Shanadóracht would be senatorship, and it splits it into shan and adoracht, so it doesn't even split out the acht, of course. But shan is a very common, very regular Irish morpheme meaning old. So dena means people, shandana means old, or dena means person, shandana means old person. Here in the second one you see shan aimshra acht, so shan aimshra acht means old time, aimshra meaning time, of course. So the only thing there that didn't really work is I would have preferred to see it have acht at the end of it, so it sort of segments it without necessarily thinking, okay, this needs an A and this needs an A. So as far as the derivational morphology, I feel like there's some limitations there that do affect that splitting, but it did fairly well when it came to inflection, or splitting it up based off, you know, sort of inflectional terms, if you want. So it understood that there is an uru in front of arachthus, and it split out that T. And then feki mean, you know, fek is like, so feki is the future tense. So feki me hu amarak, feki me amarak hu, sorry. I will see you tomorrow. Ni, eki me, so ni is going to soften it, so you have the shevu. So it split it there, but it didn't really recognize that that shevu isn't, it's not really that, it shouldn't be in that root there. So I thought that that was interesting. A couple of examples where I have, you know, what the actual solution be. The only other problem I saw with it, so you see an issue when you get loan words involved. The other thing is, what if two words are phonetically very similar, so they evolved in a similar way, so the spelling is very similar, but they have completely different meanings, like farig, ta farig, or I'm angry, and far, meaning man. So when it split out fargach to be far, g, ach, and it said, oh, this interfix here is g, that makes no sense. It definitely should have been farg as the prefix here. And then it gets extra thorny because fargacht is manhood, masculinity. So anyways, but you know, I just put the Proto-Celtic here to show you that they do have different roots. So there's no relation. All right, so why should we care? I probably should have started with this, to be honest. And the thing is, you know, I could stand here and say, Irish is a language of poetry, it's a language of beauty, it's a language that connects us to the land, it's one of the oldest languages in Europe. You know, it's an incredibly intricate language. I really enjoy learning it. The community is amazing. And when a language dies, an entire culture and way of thinking dies with it. Chirgan chenga chirgan anam. And that might not connect with you, right? And that's okay. Kind of. We'll forgive you. But it is really interesting and it is really useful because how we deal with these problems informs how we treat morphologically complex languages in general. You know, Russian, Hungarian, Turkish, these are all morphologically rich languages, and I think that it is really important that we figure out how to make our pipelines better for those languages as well. So this first paper here is from the people who created Morfessor, and it does seem I have more citations I could give you overall to sort of set up this argument, but morpheme level analysis improves natural language processing tasks by capturing meaningful morphological units. Now, for morphologically not rich languages, it's a waste of time and it's really not efficient, but it does seem that for morphologically rich languages, this is something that we should be considering. So with morpheme segmentation and something called subword tokenization, which I don't have time to go into today, but essentially it's splitting up the words, not necessarily into the precise morphemes as I was talking about earlier, but instead segmenting them in ways that can still capture important morphological information. You can reduce out of vocabulary rates. subword tokenization and explicit morphological segmentation can improve accuracy in sensitive tasks like question and answering. There is a lot, of course, about machine translation. So, Ellen and I went to this conference together about literary translation, and we have a lot of opinions about it, of course. Is it coming after Ellen's job, and what the ethics behind that and everything like that, and it's an interesting discussion. But I do think that the main goal of our project and what we were thinking about is rather being able to provide a resource on the morphemes of Irish, which can help translators, be able to translate sense by sense and to have, maybe more flexibility and more resources as they work. So I still think that it's very useful.
So some of you might be aware that we spoke about Míreadóir in August at the monthly Python Ireland meeting, but we have made some changes and kind of adapted and kind of progressed from there. So we just wanted to say a little bit in case anybody was like, this is boring, you did the same thing 2 months ago. So we have finally got permission from Fáras na Gaeilge, which is the cross-border international body for the Irish language, and they've given us permission to use their data from Changlan.ie, which is the main dictionary that we used at the beginning.
We're big girls with a research license.
Yeah, we had to sign a contract and everything, it was wild. We also have migrated the website over to Míreadóir.ie, and we have been able to share, as I said, share the project with our colleagues in Ireland, Scotland, and then in the wider translation studies community, and there is a really, really big interest in it, and they're so excited to have it be live. So we're looking forward to that. We've also been able to update the website to include exact and partial match searching. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, as far as the accents go and everything. So if you want to, different dialects are going to change as far as what might be a rhyming pattern. So in the Ulster dialects, which is what I'm learning and what she speaks, we don't really pay attention so much to the fadas, so it could still rhyme, unlike the other dialects.
And it can still find things with either an accent or without an accent, so that's really important, especially if you can't spell. So, like me. And then lastly... we've had a lot of support from Spacey, and so we're really excited to continue that part of this project, and then just amongst the Irish and programming community, so it's been really great. Yeah, other projects as well, kind of surrounding Míreadóir. We attended the Seattle Literary Translation Conference at the start of October, as Mykalin said, and at the last conference, or at the last meeting, I spoke about a forthcoming article that I was working on, which is going to be published now in January in the literary magazine Core, which is from Dublin. And Gar Uin Rehar Chachid Tach Daniel, that's a lot of H's, is an Irish digital dark age now. So I basically talk about the loss of online-only Irish language resources from like the beginning of the digital age. Which kind of has to do with this as well, especially with Winglecht, as I mentioned before, the CD-ROM. We've also submitted Míreadóir and information about Míreadóir to the peer-reviewed journal based in Galway, Lane, Changa and Review, which is an Irish language academic journal. And Mykalin is also working on her PhD application based on this project, so it's a lot going on.
So as far as future work goes, we've been in contact with Fáras na Gaeilge, and we're working on getting terms from Termapangaí included, which is just going to expand the vocabulary we have access to. I do want to update, so going back to Ellen's initial problem of wanting something that alliterates and has the same ending, what we want to do is separate out the searches so people can search for it begins with this, maybe it contains this, and it ends with this, and then they just have the option and the flexibility. They don't necessarily have to do that. So that's next on the list. That's fine. It's the morpheme thing that's the pain. And then we want to include affixes where possible. So I do have a resource which I've been able to tentatively use to tag about 4,000 Irish words. So we've sent off a sort of inquiry about, can we use this data? Where did the data come from is actually a question. Is it reliable? So tentatively, I've got 4,000 words tagged, 50,000 to go. After that, we're going to consider different methods to maybe use that information to tentatively tag the rest of it, and then potentially validate that with a citizen science project or something like that. From that, it would be really nice to create a corpus of Irish morphemes, and firstly, just for people to have access to, but secondly, to sort of do like almost a spell check. So if people do a substring search, but it's actually a common Irish morpheme, it will suggest it and say, did you want to do this morpheme search? So do you want words that actually contain this specific meaning as well? So that would be a nice addition once we get a few of these steps done or partially done. But the thing that I'm really mostly interested in is making an Irish rhyming dictionary or some sort of rhyming tool that's sensitive to the dialects. So, you know, spelling you can't just type in the end of a word and get everything that rhymes with it. You can use Míreadóir as sort of a crude rhyming dictionary, but for instance, in Ulster, ADH is going to make an oo sound, so anything that ends with U fada is also going to rhyme. There's about 7+ endings that...
in Ulster, there's 7 endings that all make an oo sound,
yeah.
Which is great for learners because they just are like, oh, just ooh.
Everything's softer.
Else, it's very difficult.
Everything's softer and sweeter in Ulster, as we say. We like to lenite and go ooh. So that's on the list to do, and then so not just you know, match rhymes, but also to be able to separate things into syllables, which is going to affect meter. So thinking specifically of translation for Seanás songs and poems in the Irish language, and helping translators in that regards, either interlingual translation, so from the different dialects, or actually Irish to English and other languages. And so also being able to segment words into their syllables, which is different, of course, from morpheme segmentation. And Spacey, there's a community plugin for syllables, and you won't believe this, I actually have some data I can use. In a minority language, that's very exciting. So that's something that I'm working on, and then next year we are hoping to launch at the Oireachtas na Samhna in 2025. That has nothing to do with the government, by the way. Oireachtas just means gathering, so every year they're just gathering in November, the beginning of November, with all the Irish speakers, and they do have technology launches there. It's one of our biggest events every year for the Irish language community. And then we have some other potential projects. So I think, you know, I think we have some time to talk about these actually. So one of the things we didn't really get to talk about a lot is, you know, ethics and everything like that, and sensitively working with endangered languages. So I mean, it's definitely an enriching thing to do, you know, and you don't have to be fluent in the language in order to work with people and to help them, you know. But, you know, some of the things that I've been thinking about, it would be pedagogical materials for programming in Irish. So for the Gael School, if they want to teach programming but through Irish language media. And then translation of the Leaving Cert for certain subjects. So there's the computer programming Leaving Cert nowadays, and then they don't have that offered in Irish, and you know, you get extra points if you do your Leaving Cert in Irish. And then just Irish language teaching tools could be interesting as well. So we've thought of a few things that we could extend upon. And of course, I'll be working more with Spacey to develop pipelines for the Irish language. And then Ellen has a couple of points. Of course, she was publishing about...
Basically just overall more preservation and conservation of the Irish language, of Irish language resources. I talk about it in my article, but you know, we've lost archive.org for a couple of weeks. The British Library's website archive has been down for over a year now, and there's a lot of Irish resources that really now only exist on basically through the back door of the internet, the archive.org, and on memory sticks in random departments of universities. So I am really interested in doing more about conservation and preservation. And then also Astrahor Avashor, from the beginning of our talk, is back again, and I'm currently working on a translation article about dealing with the devil in Irish English translation, and also kind of the act of translating from Irish to English. Oh, and if you'd like to know more, and if you want to get in contact with us, you can use the QR code at the bottom for our details.
That's just for people who are interested in the Irish language and programming, but if you want to talk in general, I'm available.
Yeah. So, Gurmila Mayagov, thank you very much.
Hi, dús spoire hatan de cur láthar gomorlam, so Gurmila Mayagov.
Gurmila.
So just one quick question. You mentioned the antiquated Wingleach, so just wondering if you've investigated some more recent tools. Like I know Terma has a Corda Costa, where you can do suffix and prefix matching. So have you looked into that, and what limitations did you find, if any?
We did actually end up buying a copy of Winglake to have a look and see what it was like, and it still works. We've been able to port it onto a modern computer. However, it's out of date because it's only based on the 1977 edition of the dictionary. Terma also has a suffix, you're right, in the Curdach Chasta, but it's only technical terminology, it's not everything. So it really is this gap that we're trying to fill of kind of all-encompassing suffix, prefix, affix search tool for the Irish language.
It's very limited also as far as what prefixes and suffixes it actually contains. So, part of the problem is what morphemes are there really that we should hopefully isolate, and what are their meanings as well is a huge question. Yeah. Thank you.
Gurmila.
So, as I understand it, this is like singling out each word and tokenizing them, right? Or sorry. I'm just...
To tokenize the word, to tokenize the words, there's like subtokenization, but you could think of it like tokenization into its morphemes, to break it down into its morphemes. That's not what Míreadóir does currently, but the problem to be able to make Míreadóir do what we want to do, that would be the problem to solve, yes.
Okay, so the morpheme analysis really is on the individual words, right? Is that correct? What limitations do you see in that, and have you considered something like bigram or like n-gram analysis of like words coming in a sequence sort of thing?
I haven't. Can we talk afterwards?
Yeah.
It sounds like you know things I don't. And that's why we do these. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
No more questions?
Couple.
Yeah, I saw you mentioned you were doing this for Scots Gaelic as well.
No,
Think about it.
so Mykalin and I met on a Scots Gaelic course on the Isle of Skye over a year and a half ago, and we were back in the summertime, and we just happened to flex a little bit and say we were working on Míreadóir, and there are quite a few similarities between Irish and Scots Gaelic. So some of the researchers at the University at Salmore Ostig, they wanted to have a look at it and see, but there really isn't equivalent in Scots Gaelic at all. So they were very interested, and I think in terms of technology across the board, we're a lot more advanced with Irish compared to online dictionaries and online resources for learners. So they were very interested to see where we were going with it and to kind of keep them updated. So.
Thank you so much.
Oh.
One more question?
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering if there's similar tools to the one you're trying to create in other languages as well, and how do they usually do it? Is it just easier because they have this large corpus or dictionaries to work off of, or?
Well, the thing is, if you look at an English dictionary, for instance, just Google any word. There's going to be pronunciation of that word, and there's going to be the roots of that word. So one of the reasons I was so passionate to work about this as an Irish language learner is, I had a classics education, so I didn't take English for a while. I took Latin, and then I was required to learn Latin and Greek roots, and I feel like that gives you an insight into the grammar and vocabulary of the language, and to be able to understand fundamentally where those words came from and what they mean and what those roots are. It really helps you have a certain command of the language and a certain grasp of the language and the meaning of those words. And so it's such a powerful thing in English for us to understand where our language came from. And to be able to include that in Irish language dictionaries would be an amazing thing.
I think about some translations that are just like phonetic translations of English words and loan words and borrow words.
I think kind of carry on from what Mykalin said, the fact that you can hopefully use Míreadóir to find, or eventually use it to find morphemes and then like kind of work your way backwards from that. But at the minute, it's really up to the translator themselves to find these new words. And, you can kind of base it on the Irish language or existing words, but there's really no way of searching for those or finding those. it's really what's in your head or who you can talk to be like, I need a word for this or whatever. So like, for example, I wanted to translate the word girl bossing a couple of weeks ago. So I asked my group chat that Mykalin and I are both in with a bunch of Irish language colleagues, and the word for a manager in Irish is a banisteoir. So you might see it in the back of football jerseys and GA games or for hurling games. But the word for a woman in Irish is ban, but it's spelt with an extra letter. So I was like, oh, banisteoir. And then they were like, Alan, you've got too much time in your hands. And I was like, yes. So at present, there's no kind of way to do it unless it's like internally, you know yourself. And hopefully with more, it'll be more accessible for people to come up with like know translations.
Can I propose Mykalin?
Head girl?
Head girl is not quite the same.
Girl boss, like girl manager, yeah.
It is a really interesting question. I've had this conversation with colleagues over at DCU who work over at Terma, and you can say, hey, you don't have this word, and they can add it in. It is this sort of philosophy of translation. Do you want to Gaelicize an English word, or do you want to kind of go more the Icelandic route? Which
it is. I always find it really fun because with DCU and Terma.ie, which is the terminological dictionary of the Irish language, if a word doesn't exist, you can recommend words. And I always have a lot of fun, like thinking of the most bizarre translations I could think of for terminology in English. And normally they come back and go, no, we're not going to do that. But it's still a really, really good translation exercise. But, yeah.
So in summary, we hope they will.
But yeah, and as I said at the beginning, I think our time is up. But if anybody wants to chat, we'll be outside as well, so we can have a bit more core Gurmila.
Thank you so much.